I think we're on.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Files. Today, Max and I are going to be discussing where you would want to stay in New York City if you are not staying in Manhattan. And we're going to be focusing on the four other boroughs and also where Max stayed on his recent trip to in Jersey City, actually. So we'll start you off there, Max. What were your impressions of the trip, and what do you think of Jersey City as a place to stay overall?
Yeah, I mean this question is something that we talk about a lot, right? Especially every time I visit New York, it seems to be one of it seems to be top of mind in that what is this area of New York like or whatever. So, I'm not an expert at all, but it's just something that we often talk about. And yeah, this past trip was my first time really being on that side, right across the border in Jersey. Really my first time spending any significant time there. We were there for a week in Jersey City, and I only knew about it on paper, which was that it's a very easy one-stop train ride into Manhattan. Um, Multiple ferries going across into Manhattan. It's a pretty good sort of walkable, dense transit adjacent kind of location. They've got a little downtown. These are all the things that I knew about on paper. But being there, I guess I felt like I discovered two things. One was that what I expected, that it has, that it's pretty walkable, that it's very, very aesthetically beautiful. I mean, just being right there on the water with the New York skyline across many, many different vantage points. It's really nice during the day, at dusk, at night, every time of day. It's quite nice to look across and see New York City. But then I guess two things that it took actually being there and sort of living it to realize. One, was that it really wasn't very vibrant at all. And for my wife, I always bring up her points of view as sort of a foil to the urbanist viewpoint, right? So because she doesn't really pay attention to cities, doesn't care so much about that. And yeah, her first, second, third thoughts and comments as we walked around Jersey City and explored and got food and stuff is that, there's no people. And, this was December. It wasn't too cold. It was actually not cold for winter in New York, but yeah, it did feel a little bit dead, and it rarely was there, a lot of people.
Yeah.
There really wasn't ever like sort of a wow, look at all these people like you have in many parts of Manhattan. And then the second thing was, even though it's just one stop on the path to get into Manhattan, with two young kids, it feels like a major obstacle. And so, for our family and our sort of travel habits and our wants, I think I would much rather be either in Manhattan or in the place where I want to be, rather than thinking, okay, it's convenient to get there. No, I think I'd rather just be there. So, yeah, those were my takeaways. But honestly, Jersey City is certainly a very viable alternative for many people living and working in the Big Apple, or people coming to visit. It presents good value.
Well, and it feels like kind of like a bedroom community to Manhattan, but kind of more of a posh one from the way you described the high rises and all the presence that was there. I get that impression. So it might be, and I think that view as you described, I mean, that definitely that adds some level of value. So
yeah, definitely. And Jersey City isn't the only Jersey option. I mean, you have Hoboken, a couple stops up north on the path.
yeah.
There's another stop. There's a second stop. And so, there's a couple other pockets. But Jersey City is just the one that we experienced. So I can't really speak too much to those others. I imagine they have great skyline views as well.
Right, yeah. So, on another trip, you stayed, I guess, previously in Long Island City too, which is right on the edge of Queens. So, how would you compare that? And is that maybe, even though it's outside of Manhattan, is that a little better experience for you than having stayed in Jersey City?
Yeah. So Long Island City, that was in 2019. Um, 6 months ago, we were actually up there and we were in Flushing. So I want to mention that because both of those locations are in Queens, um, and I think it does paint a broader picture of how there's a lot. I guess for us, downtown Flushing would sort of be a destination. We were actually
Yeah.
asked to go have dinner with some friends in Flushing on this past trip, and we decided not to do it because it just felt like it'd be like 2.5 hour trek or so, round trip
Yeah.
with kids, and we just decided it was too far. But for us, Flushing is a place that we would want to go, or a place that we would want to be.
Well, there's
On
really
that,
great ethnic food there, right?
yeah. That's the reason. You got me. That's the reason. If you're not there for tennis, then you're there for food.
True,
uh,
true. Yeah.
um, Long Island City is much more sort of feels much more fabric of the city, and again, you can see Manhattan across the water. I think that there's been quite a lot of sort of infill development, making it more of a dense, vibrant, walkable place over the last decade. And it's definitely been, thrown about often as sort of a good value play, a good
Yeah.
alternative for people who might normally live and work in Manhattan to find a place a little bit further out with that more affordable or more square footage or whatever. And then, of course, Long Island City is the location where Amazon had planned to put its sort of mini HQ2 when they were going to head to New York. And that really would have totally transformed that area. I guess many people can sort of see the potential there. And it's definitely strikes me as being more of a place to be and spend time in, and a place where people would come to you and visit and hang out, versus Jersey City, which, as you said, sort of a bedroom community. It's a funny way to describe it, but sort of is true that you wouldn't. It's not really a destination place. It's not really people from the city going out to Jersey City.
Yeah.
It's more of a place where you just choose to stay and live
Right,
while
right.
you're not doing things. So
Yeah, yeah. Makes
but
sense.
yeah, so I think Long Island City has more going for it, in that regard, and things to do, and being sort of a destination or a place to be.
Yeah. Well, the Museum of the Moving Image, I've heard, is one of the more well-known attractions around there. And like you said, I think probably that part of Queens probably just feels more walkable and urbane in general.
Mhm.
I actually had a similar experience of kind of staying out more in Flushing. And it's, as you said, it's kind of a little more sprawling. So, and it's so far out that
Mhm.
like if you were, not out there for tennis or whatever, and not out there for really good food, it is probably like things are just more spread out in general, and it's harder to really have that kind of traditional urban vibe that you'd be looking for in New York City. So,
Yeah,
it's a longer subway trip in too.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, the other three, I don't know that either of us, of course, I have very limited experience in New York City, but just briefly going into those, Staten Island is a place that I really only know because it's the least NYC borough. It's kind of much more suburban. And I know about the Staten Island Ferry, which is apparently one of the best free things to do in New York City or anywhere. But other than that, I don't really have a lot of insight on it.
yeah. I don't have much to say about Staten Island. I did take the ferry. I did bring my kids uh, on that trip, to sort of pass by the Statue of Liberty. When we were going, I was looking, what could we do for like an hour or 2 hours in Staten Island to kind of top off the trip. You're riding the boat, but you want to do something when you get there and then come back.
Right.
And to be honest, it was a very, very short list. There was nothing
Yeah.
that really grabbed me as something to
No.
do there, especially if we were just going to be coming from the ferry terminal and walking. There's limits to your options, but I just don't know that there are that many options to begin with. And
Yeah.
then as I was kind of fretting about it and telling my friend, who is a Brooklynite, and somebody in New York City through and through, so he may be biased. He was like, just get off the ferry and then walk back on. and then that's what we ended up doing. So I
Yeah.
spent a good 5 minutes in Staten Island, and never really leaving the boat at
Hey, you
all.
still got there, right?
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that's the extent of my experience there. But yeah, just doing research, there didn't seem like much to draw us to spend some time there. Um, Brooklyn, I guess, is another place that we were going to talk about. And Brooklyn, of course, it rivals Manhattan in a lot of ways. It's sort of the trendy in terms of trendy and places to be and
Kind of
stuff.
become where the cool kids go.
Yeah.
Manhattan's kind of the rich people, and Brooklyn's for people that are actually creatives and stuff.
Yeah,
Live.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a generalization, but it's worth there's enough truth to it to make it kind of a good way to sort of describe it and
Yeah.
think of it. And so yeah, of course, there's tons to do in Brooklyn. It's it probably is much better served kind of dividing the borough into multiple areas and talking about those, just like you would
Yeah.
do with Manhattan. But yeah, just to broadly speak, there's tons of places that you would want to stay in Brooklyn. I know for some people, that's where they go when they come to visit New York. It's not Manhattan, but it is Brooklyn. So,
Yeah.
to me, it's sort of on par with Manhattan. And so it's like, what are you there to do? What are you there to see?
Yeah.
You're there to be in Brooklyn, then you stay in Brooklyn. If you're
Right.
there for things in Manhattan, then you stay in Manhattan.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of, I guess I heard someone talk to Hong Kong about that similarly. It's kind of weird to compare it like that, but how Central is more like Manhattan in that side, and then kind of the island across like whatever the
Oh,
Lin
sorry.
Kuei Fong and all that is like Manhattan area and kind of that central area and stuff. And
Uh-huh.
in the area across the water is more like a Brooklyn type
Oh,
area. I'm trying to remember the name, but it was an interesting comparison.
okay.
So yeah, but anyways, with
That
that
is
said,
interesting.
I guess yeah, like Brooklyn holds its own in kind of like a cultural level and even in a density level. Like as you said, it's like I think it's larger than Chicago by population and city limits, or it could be. I'm not sure. It's really massive by population, so it really almost could be more easily discussed with the varying parts compared to say a Jersey City, which has a smaller core area. I guess the last one is the Bronx, and of course, I got up there in 2009 for a Yankees game at the new stadium. They were still in the process. I got to see the old facade up of the old Yankee Stadium was still standing then, so that was kind of cool to see that. But I've heard that the botanical garden and the zoo up there are really good, and then there's like I think like Wave Hill is like a really cool mansion and stuff. But I don't know a lot about if there's a ton of like urban places or places to stay or like kind of like a downtown area of the Bronx. You don't really hear it didn't really necessarily get a ton of attention and stuff. So I'm not sure if you've had any experience with that either.
Yeah, I don't really know the Bronx at all. So yeah, I can't even speak to that. I've never taken a ferry to step foot in the Bronx and then leave. So yeah, my understanding of it is even less than the other boroughs.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, guys. There's the
But
5 boroughs of New York City. If you had to pick one next for someone that was new to New York City and wanted to stay outside of Manhattan, check somewhere different out, which one would you recommend?
Oh, that's easy. It's Brooklyn. I mean, yeah, I was gonna say before you even threw out, outside Manhattan, like it's either Brooklyn or Manhattan. So once you eliminate Manhattan, then, just um, it's sort of the epicenter for a lot of different events and things that happen. And really, the only thing that Manhattan clearly has over it is sort of like these long-standing traditional neighborhoods, and then the tourists. Like if you look at all the tourist spots, I guess ultimately Manhattan will win in terms of quantity. But yeah, I'll say like with Brooklyn, probably the number one thing I was hoping to do on this past trip was go to I think it's Diker Heights for their Christmas
The
lights
Christmas lights,
display,
right? Yeah, yeah.
and that's in Brooklyn. That's where I wanted to go. We didn't make it ultimately because it just didn't quite fit into our sort of travel plan itinerary, but because it's pretty far out of the way, all the way down the southern tip of Brooklyn. But yeah, I mean that would have been my number one thing to do if I could have just made it work.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, hopefully both of us will have some more experience in New York City and be able to provide, kind of gain some more insight on these areas as time moves forward.
yeah. Before we wrap up, I'm just gonna extend this a little bit longer. You said Hong Kong. I think maybe you were thinking about Kowloon or Kowloon. The
Kowloon is
Probably
Brooklyn.
the other
Yes,
side.
yes, there we go.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
so Kowloon is Brooklyn. I guess I can see that a little bit more now, especially from a sort of a Westerner's perspective, because Hong Kong Island is like the expat zone, and where Westerners would be
Yeah,
normally, and that's kind of what Manhattan is, sort of refined, sort of long-standing, sort of where you go, and then
yeah,
locals are on the Kowloon side. So
yeah,
that,
yeah,
that makes sense to me. And then as time has passed now, and some areas of Kowloon have become gentrified and sort of seen more of an influx of Westerners into those different pockets. Yeah, actually, it
yeah,
makes a
yeah.
lot it makes a lot of sense to me now that
There you
we
go.
frame it that way.
So,
Cool.
all right.